Oh, hi. I'm Robert Horton. I'm a mostly beloved film critic in Seattle and a board member at Scarecrow Video, also Scarecrow's programmer historian in residence. And last year we started something called Scarecrow Academy, which was, as it turned out, a year-long series of gatherings and discussions about film. Our first year was devoted to the movies of 1959. This year we started with a second semester, as it were, and decided to go with something called The Art in Horror, Horror and the Director, which looked at horror movies through the lens specifically of the art of directing. This was going well. The screenings were attended by a faithful and very lively audience, and we got exactly halfway through the semester. I can prove it to you by showing our folder here, our flyer, with a screening of Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World on March 7th, and at that point the pandemic shut us down. So we only got halfway through. Now, Scarecrow itself is open again. You can reserve movies, you can rent films, you can come to their window and pick things up. You can also do mail-in renting of movies. But we are not going to be gathering at Scarecrow anytime soon. We still can't do that. So we will be picking up our Scarecrow Academy midway through our semester, but doing it online via Zoom. So we want to tell you how to know about that, how to register for that, and how we're going to pick it up again. So right around me, you will see some links. It's either below me or above me or to the side or something, on how you can register for the course. The course is free, but you need to register so that we can get you hooked up with Zoom and have everybody in the class. There are also information in these links about how to see the movies streaming, the movies that we're going to talk about in the semester. So check that out. Of course, you can also come and rent the movies at Scarecrow and watch them that way. You do need to watch the films, or that's what we want you to do, is to watch the films before you participate in the discussion. For more information, you could also friend Scarecrow on Facebook. You can follow Scarecrow on Twitter. @Scarecrow Video is the handle. You can follow me on Twitter. @CitizenHorton is my handle. And we will give you updates to what's going on in our semester. So the movie that we were going to pick up on, and that we will indeed pick up on, is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. And so I'm going to say a few things by way of introduction that will sort of set up our Zoom meeting and our discussion. So first of all, watch the movie first, and then come back for the talk. The Birds was released in 1963, so it came out 3 years after Hitchcock's Psycho, which was a great success for him, The Birds was also a box office success. These are really the only two films that are horror movies in Hitchcock's canon, the horror movies proper, that is, and they both did quite well. I'll save some of the description for how the movie came about for our Zoom meeting in Scarecrow Academy, but I will say that it was based on a short story by Daphne du Maurier, the author of the novel that was the source material for Hitchcock's first Hollywood movie, Rebecca, which was his entree into American filmmaking. It's safe to say that the short story was vastly changed for Hitchcock's purposes by the time it got to the screen. Hitchcock cast a model, Tippi Hedren, to play the lead role in this film. We will undoubtedly talk more about her and some of her mixed experiences working with Hitchcock in our Zoom meeting. And her co-star in the movie was a sort of rising star from Australia, Rod Taylor. We'll talk about some of the technical innovations in the film. It's quite a spectacular movie as far as the special effects are concerned. We will talk a little bit about the soundtrack of the film. It's very interesting. The movie has no music except for a couple of songs that you hear sung on the soundtrack, and yet Hitchcock hired the great composer Bernard Herrmann to work on the soundtrack with him, even though there wasn't going to be a musical score. This itself was kind of an innovation. We'll talk about the eerie way that works in favor of the movie. As for the film itself, I'll just put out this idea as a kind of talking point for our discussion. I think Alfred Hitchcock made films out of fear, fear of being caught, fear of being exposed, fear of chaos, fear of women, a lot of fears that were the fodder for his art. I was just reading a quote by Primo Levi recently where he was talking about Kafka, and he said of Kafka, he fears punishment and at the same time desires it. I wonder if there might be something in there that relates to Hitchcock as well. Because Hitchcock had complete command of his art, he used these fears and all of his other stuff to create complex and, I think, unexpectedly empathetic scenarios in his films. That might be why Hitchcock's films so often seem to be about something other than what they are just on the surface. For instance, Notorious is a film about spies and ex-Nazis and uranium and everything. But what it's really about is the idea of betrayal and trust in an intimate relationship. Rear Window is about a man who's voyeuristically gazing at the people at the tenement across his courtyard and maybe thinking there's a murder going on there. But what it's really about is how you commit to a connection with another person and overcoming narcissism. If you look at The Birds through that lens, it becomes an interesting addition to that idea, partly because it has Hitchcock's most flagrantly outrageous premise that the world's bird population has revolted and it's turned against mankind, thus giving new meaning to the phrase "a murder of crows." It's a straight-up horror premise, and with that as a backdrop, Hitchcock focuses on a small group of people who live their lives somewhat complacently, somewhat glibly, you could say, and who are about to have their lives torn apart by this natural catastrophe, something that dwarfs their kind of smaller personal concerns, forces them to find resources within themselves and start over at ground zero. So maybe this scenario isn't so outlandish. I don't know, talking from the perspective of 2020. So we'll talk about that. We'll look at some of the movie's incredible set pieces of suspense, and talk a little bit about how the cinema was changing at this time and how that is reflected in The Birds. I think if you watch the film, you will see that Hitchcock had certainly been watching films by some of the great international cinema filmmakers of that time, Ingmar Bergman, Michelangelo Antonioni, for instance. I think you can see the way that this altered the look and feel of The Birds, all the way up to its very unusual and very eerie ending. So we'll pick it up there and we'll continue the conversation at the first Zoom meeting. Follow the links, please, to find out more information on how you can register. And we hope to see you at Scarecrow Academy for our renewed version of the art of horror. See you there.